Sorry about the delay there for broadcasting, folks. We're going to give it just a few minutes to let everybody jump on board, and we will uh, begin the presentation. And it looks like we have quite a few people who are here, so we're going to go ahead and get rolling. Thanks for joining us today. This is Travis Heiss with James Attorney Marketing, and with us today is Tom Wallen. Tom has been a personal friend and a colleague for a long time, and Tom has done a wonderful job of mastering client intake. And so Tom's going to fill us in today on many of the tips and tricks and kind of the foundational pieces of the intake process that most people either know or they don't know. And if they don't know them, this is going to be a great session for you. So Tom, you want to introduce yourself and tell me a little
sure. So a little bit of background on myself. I had my own DUI defense practice for several years. I sold that about 4 years ago. So I've had a lot of experience handling intake and dealing with that. And then I work now as Senior Vice President of Legal Marketing for Scorpion. And as part of my job there, I actually help firms with their intake and work with different firms dealing with that. And then also I have my own personal injury law firm where I partner with a couple firms across the country and handle a few cases that way. So keep me busy, but I've had a lot of experience and listened to a lot of calls. So hopefully we'll get some good information here and people will have a good takeaway from this.
Oh, definitely. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and jump right into it and get started. So jump on the first slide here and get rolling. So again, it's Tom already told you about himself, so we're going to dive right into the second thing. So Tom, take it from here.
All right. So what do potential new clients want to hear? So we're just going to do a general thing right here and then get into more detail in the next slides coming up. But, like I said before, I've listened to thousands of calls. I've signed up probably over 1,000 cases just over the phone in doing my DUI defense practice. And one of the things that we'll go over this later, but one of the problems is that people get very short. They don't have empathy and they don't spend time when the caller calls in and they take that call. They typically want to just get down to the pricing. Can this person afford my services? They don't show empathy. They don't sympathize with the client. And so we're going to get into that coming up here in the next few slides and talk about some things you can do to make sure that your office, as well as yourself, are doing the best practices to retain as many clients as possible.
It's funny, Tom, because I talk to attorneys every day, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard well, I'm pretty good at the whole intake thing. I sign 99% of the people that I talk to that I want to. If that were the case, attorneys would be they wouldn't have this problem. So hopefully some of the things that you're about to say today are going to resonate.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you can relate. Part of working with Scorpion is you can bring in as many leads as you can, and if someone's getting 100 leads a month but they're not responding to those leads properly, they're not going to see a good ROI on their investment. So as being part of Scorpion and working in the digital marketing field, it can be frustrating when you're seeing the client get a number of leads and then they're not getting the ROI. But then when you go in to listen to the calls, sure enough, sometimes they're not calling the person back for 24 hours. Sometimes they take the call and they're just gotten some issues that we're going to get into in a little bit later on. But yeah, that's the frustrating thing on the digital marketing side of things when you're actually delivering these leads and people are not handling them. And it would make a huge impact on their bottom line if they were just to retain even 10% more.
I agree. Let's dive right into it. Tell me, empathy is something that people talk about. I think everybody feels like they're empathetic, but yeah, I think you have a little bit different take on it. So tell me, why empathy is essential.
Yeah, empathy is like the biggest thing. I think when a caller calls in, they're typically, if this is a personal injury case, even a bankruptcy, family law, criminal matter, any of those kind of areas, they've got a problem. They're calling in and they're going to talk to you about their problem. And often I hear other attorneys when I'm listening on calls, and then also speaking to other attorneys, is they're pretty cold. They don't empathize with the client. They're just asking questions. Simply, example would be someone's crying and they're upset because their loved one was arrested for DUI and they're trying to get information. And instead of the person saying it's going to be okay, listening to them, they're immediately going into, well, what were they charged with? Was it vehicle code section 23152? Was it was it this code? Was it this code? And they're not even acknowledging that the person's really upset or crying, and they're not creating that relationship. And so when you can show empathy with someone, immediately you create a connection with that person. And you'll see later on as we go through the presentation that creating that connection allows you to charge higher fees, allows you to retain more clients. So that's one of the keys that many attorneys, they think that they do that, but I've been there myself. I get it. You're in a hurry. You have a ton of stuff to do, and you got this lead call, and you want to figure out, okay, do they even have the money to retain me? And instead of showing the empathy and taking the time to listen to them, you're trying to cut to the chase and say, okay, can they even afford me? And that's one of the biggest mistakes that law firms make.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, people just want to know that you care, and that you're going to take the time to listen to what their concerns are, whether they're important to you or not. You need, to at least make it seem to the client that they are important. I couldn't agree more.
Definitely. And then as part of that, on step 2 there is we want to create a foolproof intake system, and part of doing that is having an intake system where you know that you're getting the calls and that someone's actually taking those calls live. One of the worst things you can do is actually have a live call that comes in and then it goes to voicemail, or someone takes a message and they're not responding to that person immediately. Because in the days of internet advertising here, people simply just click down and they call the next person in line. And so if you're not taking that call immediately, you're going to be losing out. So having a system, knowing that when the call comes in, that there's a series of people that will take that call, and who's responsible for those calls when they're coming in, is vital in your intake program. And also having that system, and we'll get into a little bit later about having scripts and things, so you can measure how are you doing, how are certain employees, if you have different staff that are taking in those lead calls, how are they doing with the intake. And if you have a system in place, then you can have something that's measurable, and then it's also something that you can actually improve on and make it and understand why it's maybe working or not working.
And I think some people have an overblown idea, like that they have to have this expansive system with all of these different software systems and all these metrics and reporting platforms. And I think, we'll get more into detail later, but it's just not true. I mean, there's a lot of simple things they can put in place to track these, the metrics that you're going to be talking about, and to do some of the follow-up and other pieces as well. And we can talk a little bit more about that later, but what brought it up is your next point is utilizing e-retainers. So I think that's something that everybody knows about, but I don't see too many attorneys actually using them.
Right, and we'll get into that a little bit more and give you some recommendations as well. But e-retainers are one of the best things out there. I mean, when I was practicing 10 years ago, we didn't have that ability really. So when I had a client that I signed up or was signing up over the phone, I would literally have to fax them a retainer. And then oftentimes they didn't have a fax, so they'd be going over to a Kinko's or a Staples, and they would receive the fax over there, sign everything, and then send it back to me. And it was just really difficult. Nowadays, you can actually just, while you're on the phone with the client, send them the retainer. While they're on the phone, without ever getting off the phone, they can simply click on a few buttons, have the signature, and you got that signed retainer back before you ever get off the phone. And that's a huge advantage in order to retain people and to make sure that they're not going on to the next person.
Yeah, and texting as well. I know a lot of firms, personal injury firms specifically, who are using texting, and they're texting the retainer, and they're getting a great response from that. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's a great tip. So the fourth one is mastering the one call close. This is something that I could definitely use help with, and I know that, you've been working and studying on this for a long time, so I'm really interested in this.
Yeah, and we'll get into this a little bit more down the road here in a few more slides. But yeah, it's being able to get comfortable talking to someone and then going ahead and asking for that retainer or that credit card or whatever it is. If it's a personal injury case, to ask them to go ahead and accept the retainer over the phone and click those things while you're on the phone with them. A lot of people I've noticed, especially the firms these are great attorneys, but they've been in this era of where they have to see the client, and the client has to come and see them. And what happens is the client doesn't know that they might be the best attorney for that case. They just know that, okay, I'm comfortable with this person, but I can't see them till Friday, and it's Wednesday. And sure enough, okay, you set an appointment for them on Friday, and then you have another attorney that they call, or another attorney is calling them back, and they start talking to them, and all of a sudden they're comfortable with them, and they sign up, and you're wondering why you got no shows. And part of that's because you're not able to close them over the phone. And I understand it's a difficult thing. And again, not all cases are meant to be closed over the phone. High value personal injury cases, serious felony cases, and criminal, those kind of things, you're going to want to see the person in person, and potentially even go out to their place on some of those bigger personal injury cases.
But I think the point is people want urgency, and they want things now, and they want their intent to be fulfilled right away. And that's something that Google tells us all the time. Usually a searcher's intent is filled within, 30 to 60 minutes of them actually initiating the search for an attorney, or whether it's a pizza joint or whatever it is, but it holds true across all businesses.
Right. Your expectations now are that you're going to get something immediately. I mean, you have your phone with you, which does almost everything. You can watch TV on it. You can do everything. And so the ability now to have access to things are just completely different than they were 10 years ago. And attorneys need to understand that and come up to date with that.
And then number 5, top intake mistakes made by law firms. I'm sure that most firms have a list of things that they're well aware of. But, I think this will be interesting.
Yeah, we'll get into detail that. And there's some funny things in there that it's a lot of firms think that they're doing a good job. But when you actually go through an audit and listen to them, you realize they're making a lot of mistakes. And so that I think will be a lot of good tips there.
Well, empathy was your first point, and I think it was shocking to me. I think a lot of people were like, well, why do we have to talk about empathy? But I really like your take on it. So I'm going to let you, kind of run the show on this one.
Yeah. Okay. And we talked about it a little bit earlier, but with the empathy, it's again, listening to them, understanding their problem, and even repeating back to them what they just said to you. And I realize sometimes the clients go on and it's maybe not related to exactly what's going on with the case or the facts of the case that may matter. But it's them expressing how they're feeling. And you got to understand, they're not part of the legal system. This may be the first time they've ever even had contact with an attorney before. So you need to have the patience, listen to them, and then part of that is active listening that we talked about. And that's when you're actually, repeating back to them what they just said, telling them that you understand, telling them that you sympathize with them, any of that, creating connections with them. A good example of active listening, or even just creating a connection with someone, would be, I've had cases where I'm talking to a potential client and I hear the dog bark in the background. And so the dog barks in the background and I'll ask them, oh my gosh, you got a dog? Yeah. Well, what kind of dog? And then we start talking about the dog for 5 minutes. Well, a lot of attorneys will never do that. And they may be looking at me like I'm crazy for talking about dogs for 5 minutes in the middle of this potential new client call. But what that does is create a connection with that person. Now it humanizes it. Now you're not just an attorney, but you're kind of an ally. You're a friend. And so people need to take those things and understand that taking the time to do that kind of stuff is going to make a difference in retaining those clients.
Yeah, I agree. People want to know that, you care. And I think, this is a lesson right from Dale Carnegie, right? Repeat back, what they've told you, so that you show that you're active listening. You're an active listener. But I think that the key there is just developing a relationship and some trust. And I know that that's what you're good at. I do the same thing. When I call a prospect back that submitted a form or something, I rarely get into what they're actually calling or inquiring about until the end of the conversations. Typically, we talk about the firm or them or what's going on with them or their family or whatever it may be. But it's a great tip.
Yeah. And in listening to the calls too, and one of the points here is a lot of times people are trying to multitask when they're on the phone with someone. So I get it. I'm an attorney myself. You get really busy. You have a ton of things to do. And all of a sudden this call comes in. You don't know when the call's coming in. You can't plan it for your calendar. Oh, a call's coming in at 3:20 today for a lead. And sure enough, you're in the middle of doing something and this lead call comes in. Well, you're in business. It's a business. So you need to take that call or have someone from your staff that's going to be able to take that call. And when you're taking that call, don't be trying to send out emails. Don't be trying to do other stuff, because you're going to miss those little things that allow you to create that connection with the person.
Yeah, I agree. And in fact, I practice that myself, and I'll put my cell phone away and I'll turn off my notifications, and I actually, turn my screen off just so I don't have that distraction. And I take handwritten notes during the call, because I'm so easily distracted the way it is. But I don't think people understand that, that people can tell on the other end of the line when you're not listening, whether they can see you or not.
Exactly. And that's what's interesting. A lot of the attorneys that I work with will tell me that, oh, no, I was fully present during that call, and go back and I listen to it, and then I'll have them listen to it, and they'll realize, no, I wasn't. I can hear myself on the keyboard. I was doing this, I was doing that. And you can see where they're listening to the person talk, but they're not really. And then all of a sudden the person stops talking, and there's a few seconds before they actually say something, because they kind of blocked them out because they didn't think whatever they were saying was important. And
that person should feel like they're the only person that matters at that time, and nothing else in the world matters to the attorney except that prospect's needs. That's,
exactly.
That sounds extreme, but it's, that's what is necessary today. It's what people expect. And honestly, it's the right thing to do. Tell me about asking validating questions. I think that's, something that sounds easy, but it can be pretty challenging.
Yeah, definitely. On asking validating questions, it's showing that you understand the problem. So it's asking them questions that are around what they just described to you, so that you show that you understand what they're talking about. And then also asking questions that, is this a legal problem that you can solve that's going to be a solution for them? And then finding out, you're not discussing pricing at this point. You're just asking questions to show that, okay, is this something that I can really help them with? Is this something they need help with? And have I been listening? And then am I asking them questions that are directly related to the issue or problem that's being presented? Because as we know, sometimes the clients call and they're talking about issues that may not really matter when it comes to court and the legal side of things, but they think it's really important. And so part of asking validating questions is validating what their concerns are in their questions, but also making sure that you're asking questions that are going to help you determine, can you really help this person?
You bring up a good point. You talked about price. Well, I've always had gotten the question, like, what do you do? How do you handle somebody who calls up and I say, Tom, I just got a DUI. What do you charge for DUIs?
Yeah, that happens quite a bit. And I'm a big proponent of, you don't discuss price up front. So don't ever compete on price. If you're competing on price, you're already dead. So you need to be providing a great service and price it accordingly, and not competing with everyone else on price. One of the biggest things on that is, what I would do is, oftentimes someone would say that, so-and-so will do the case for $1,000 and you want $5,000, why should I hire you, or whatever. And we'll get into this a little bit later on how you handle these kind of things. But I usually tell them, and I don't want to quote you a price right now because I don't know all the facts of your case. In every case that we treat in the firm is an individual case, and no case is alike. We want to make sure that I understand your case completely before I can quote you a price. So if you're really interested, I'll do definitely a good job for you, and I have this expertise, but I want to make sure that I understand exactly what's involved in this case before I quote you a price.
That's a great response. Yeah, so I didn't mean to jump ahead in your presentation.
No problem.
On to the next slide. So the basics of intake systems, and this is something that I enjoy the process of setting up intake systems. But I know that I want to let you kind of run through the basics, because as an attorney, you have much better perspective than I do.
Yeah, well, we've touched on it before, but yeah, having an intake checklist, making sure that you're covering things as you're going through on the intake, that you got the information in order to make a correct decision on one, pricing, if it is a client that you're pricing, as a criminal defense attorney versus personal injury, where you're not competing on price, you're competing on service and ability. And then developing scripts, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, but having scripts in place so that people are kind of listening and they're following, but they're also making sure that they have the correct responses, and they're asking these questions in a kind of formatted way, so that it allows you to actually measure that and then to make changes. If you're not using scripts in your intake, then it's just a wild, wild west. Every call is going to be different. You may have a staff member that's taking calls and they're in a great mood that one day. Next day, they've had a horrible, night the night before. They didn't get any sleep. They're in a bad mood. They got in a fight with someone, whatever it might be. But their mood can be completely different, and how they handle that call can be completely different. So one thing is, I want to make sure when I work with firms is to make sure that they're consistently, handling the leads in a manner so that we can measure that and then make changes if needed.
I agree. And you talked about scripts, and I think a lot of people think that they have to be a word for word script. And, a lot of firms that I've worked with in the past, I've said, look, let's just develop a set of questions that you want answered that have to be answered throughout this entire call. And, let the, intake person or professional or the attorney, do a little bit of free form, conversation, so that they can get those questions answered and, not really disrupt the client's flow of information that's coming to them. And so I think people often mistake that. They say, well, how do you have a natural conversation with a prospect while you're using a script if the client isn't following the script, as you have it written?
Right.
And so that's always a big challenge you get from people, or pushback you get from intake people.
Yeah, and look, you don't want to be a robot. You're not following the script word for word and just, answer this question, answer that question. That just blows the whole point that we made, which is more importantly is that you just show empathy. If you're being a robot and simply going through a script, just word by word, you're being a robot, you're not showing empathy. So you can't be doing that. What you can do is create systems in place. So if they ask a question about the firm or the firm's experience, and with certain cases, you can have a script so that the answer is consistent. So if you're talking about the firm, you may say, we've been doing DUI defense for 20 years. We're in this courthouse all the time where you do trials, whatever it might be. But you want to have a consistent message on things. So that's where the scripts come into play. But no, like you said, you're not following it word for word and just like telling the person, no, please don't ask any questions. I'll ask the questions and you just answer them. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, that's not going to be very effective. Your third point, something that's always really just baffled me with law firms, training doesn't seem to be prevalent inside law firms on any level other than just, practical, how do I handle this case or how do I handle this particular situation? But training on technology or intake or selling, I've only seen a few firms who actually actively practice, training their staff. So this is something I think is just could be very important to firms, and they need to embrace it. I know it's time, but typically,
Yeah, but you need to make sure that you educate your firm on what are the kind of cases you take, what are you looking for, what is your background experience. Make sure that everyone working for your office understands the full background of your firm and what you're all about. Interesting thing, it's unfortunate, but I had a call where one person got a MISO lead, and on the MISO lead, the woman that took the call was a brand new paralegal. And when she took the call, she said, well, I don't know if we handle that, and took their number and said, I'll get back to you. These cases, attorneys were willing to pay $80,000 for a MISO case. Yeah. And she did that. They ended up hiring the firm across the street. The partners were friends with each other, so they knew about it. And then they were like, well, it came to Scorpion. Well, why didn't we get this case? And then went back. Sure enough, that person had called their firm first, but the paralegal didn't know that they handled it and just took a message. And the partner with that firm ended up firing the paralegal, which in my opinion was not the way to handle it. If anything, the partner should be in a little trouble for not educating the paralegal. It's not the paralegal's fault. So that's one thing where you got to make sure that you're training your staff and they understand what you're doing.
Yeah, and I've seen that all too often, and even had some problems in my own business where it's, we don't take the time to actually train our staff, and then, we put the onus on them when the mistakes happen. So, yeah, very good point. And training, takes on many forms and can be done anytime, but people need to dedicate blocks of time to training. And it's something I just don't see enough firms taking advantage of.
No, and there's a systemization that you can do to train the firms. And so when you have a consistent training thing also, it allows you to, if you spend the time to do it right the first time, you can have a system in place. So every time you have a new employee come in, you've already got a set up process that they go through. So you make sure that it's handled correctly and they're getting all the information they need. It does take a little bit of time to set it up the first time, but once you do that, then you have a consistent method that you're using, and it's going to end up saving you a lot of time over the years.
I agree. And I failed to mention in the beginning, if you folks have questions, feel free to type them in, and we'll get to them during, as soon as we can. We don't want to wait till the end. We're going to have a Q&A at the end, but if you have questions now, feel free to go ahead and type them in, and we'll try to answer them throughout the presentation. So sorry, Tom, I didn't mean that.
Oh, no, not at all.
You talk about dedicated staff, and I think this is something everybody says, I would love to have dedicated staff for my intake system, but I don't have the money or the resources or the time. So
yeah, and that's an issue. I realize there's firms of all different sizes on this webinar, and there's firms of all different sizes that I work with. And I know that when I first started my practice, it was me, and that was it. It was me. And so the calls went to my cell phone, and this is years ago, but that's how, I had to handle all the calls. But as I grew, then we could have different employees. At one point, I had 12 employees as part of the firm, and we had a dedicated 3 people that would be taking lead calls that could handle that. And we trained them. We made sure they knew what to say. They had a consistent message. And that way, you're making sure that the people that are calling in are getting the correct information about your firm. One caveat that I want to make sure that people understand is you want to make sure if you're having staff that are not lawyers doing intake, and oftentimes it's best to have them doing the intake, you want to make sure they're not actually giving legal advice. So that's one of the things that you got to be careful about. It's not that big of an issue, but it is something that you want to be aware of, and make sure that your staff isn't giving out advice on what the person should do necessarily. They're more collecting information, sharing the experience of the firm, but not giving legal advice.
And what's your experience with like call centers and intake companies? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I've worked with over a dozen call centers, and it's difficult. So no call center is perfect. They all have some pluses and minuses, but having a call center is critical in your practice. So if you're busy, like for instance, there's a family law firm I work with out in Redlands, and that family law firm, they would close their office for 2 hours. So from 12 to 2, their office was closed, and no one was answering the phones. So you just leave a message. And it was just crazy. They were paying all this money to get these leads, and leads were coming in during those hours. And people, most often now, you don't leave a message. And even if you do leave a message, you're on calling someone else who's actually picking up the phone. So using a call center, both during hours and after hours, is critical, and it's worth the money. It's not that expensive. I mean, we're talking $300-400 to have that call center. And when you do use a call center, make sure that they have a script that they go through to get the information. And then what I would do with the call center is I would have the call center say, okay, are you a current client, or are you a new client or a current client? Would be one of the things that they would ask right away. And if they're a current client, then they would take a message, and that message would get emailed to the firm. And then everyone at the firm got that email, and then someone would respond to that pretty quickly. The other way, if it was a new client, a potential new client, the operator then knew to take down the basic information and then connect that call to either myself or another attorney or staff that was set up through the call chain. So you can set up these things so that they live patch the call, and that's another feature that you want to make sure they have. So when the call center gets the call, they should be able to transfer that call live to you. So I would get a call, and I would see that it's from my answering service, and I knew if my answering service is calling me, it's because they've got a potential new client on the line. And so I'd make sure you're taking that call, and if I'm not, I would get on the phone and let the answering service know, please call so-and-so or whoever it might be that's next down on the list. But having that is critical. The live patching, again, you don't want to have to contact them back. If they've made a phone call to you, you want to do as much as possible to make sure that you're taking that call when that call comes in.
Yeah, and that's what the addition of texting and then live chat and they do the hot or live transfers to the attorney or whoever's on staff at that time is absolutely critical, because you're right. I can't tell you how many times we've looked at call tracking metrics for our clients, and we look at the missed calls, and 25-30% of the calls are missed, and they're during that lunchtime, 12 to 2, or 6 to 8 in the evening when people get off work. You'd say it should be common sense, right? Where people, they can't call you from work necessarily. Yeah. So they wait till they're off work or they're on their drive home to call. But you're not there, and you don't have an answering service to take that call. I have a question from Alex who says, does the attorney have to be present when the potential client is signing the retainer for a personal injury, or does this vary from state to state?
I don't know if it varies from state to state. I know in most states you do not have to be present when they're signing that. So doing electronic document to the potential client, you don't need to be present for that. So they'll accept electronic signatures.
Thanks for answering that. The last thing we have on here is a bullet about CRMs or content or customer relationship management systems. I think a lot of people think I just don't have the time to follow up. There's so many different pieces of software that we recommend to our clients and help them implement, whether it's a CRM, and that's a whole nother webinar. I don't want to get to.
True, but you should have something in place that allows you. So if you're, for instance, estate planning or family law, that sales cycle of the client making the decision to actually hire a firm can often be 60 days, 90 days, or longer. They may get in a fight with a spouse and think that they want a divorce, call you, get a consultation, but then maybe they're going to work it out. And 6 months later, they realize it's just not working out, and we're going to actually file for divorce. Well, if you're not still in front of them 6 months later, now you're trying to advertise to a brand new person all over again. And you're paying all the costs, where if you put them into like a lead magnet system where you're sending out a newsletter or something, at least keeps you top of mind. So when they do make that decision that they really are ready to hire a lawyer, you're still there and top of mind for them.
Yeah, and that's people think it's just for big firms. I mean, there's just varying degree, levels of software programs that can automate a lot of that, and certainly something that I enjoy. That's my passion, but it's not just for big firms. That's the point I really want to make.
No, and that's one of the best things that's with technology and the advances and stuff. It used to be so expensive to have your own email system or newsletter system, but now there's so many programs out there where it's really inexpensive and easy to set up as well. So it's definitely worth doing. There's a ton of other things. That's a whole seminar in itself, is on newsletters and how you can integrate other lawyers into the newsletter and, be sharing clients back and forth and helping each other out. So, but yeah, keeping in contact or having some kind of lead magnet that allows you to stay in contact with them is critical.
Yeah, and we could actually, it's probably, I'll have you on for that session too, because I know you have a lot of great information on this, but jumping into utilizing e-retainers, I know you have some specific recommendations for, how to use e-retainers.
Yeah, well, one is going paperless, period. Most people are doing that now, most firms. I know a lot of firms as well, though, and my firm was one of them. Before I sold that, was we would scan everything and everything would be paperless. When I say paperless, I'm saying it was all scanned, but we also had an actual physical file that we would take to court with us. But we also knew before it got put into that physical file, it was scanned and it was available. And that comes in handy when you're in court or dealing with other things. So having your paperless office is very important and helpful down the road. And then when we're talking about retaining clients without in-person meetings, having the e-retainers allows you to do that. And again, I know that we got the question earlier, and then there's a few circumstances and some med mal cases and some other things where you need to be present with the person or have things notarized. But for the most part, you can use an e-retainer to retain those people. And again, the firms, if you've got a case that's worth $500,000 in your personal injury firm, you're not using an e-retainer. You're driving out to the hospital, you're driving out to their house, you're getting on a plane, flying to it if it's in another state, whatever it might be, depending on the value of the case. But I work with a firm here in Southern California where they're signing up over 100 cases a month. And a lot of those cases are smaller, just, soft tissue or, not major injuries for personal injury. And so they utilize the e-retainer all the time. Why? They're on the phone, they sign the person up, and then they evaluate the case and get moving forward on it.
No, I think it's great recommendation. And we've been utilizing or having attorneys utilize FaceTime and things like Zoom meetings to actually, get that face-to-face contact to build that trust level, and then utilize sharing the screen to sign the e-retainer. So there's a lot of ways to do that. Again, that's not difficult to do. I think people just think this stuff is so challenging and so complex to set up that it's just beyond them, but it's not. And I think your point's well received.
And that's another thing too, is realizing that on some of these cases, someone, maybe you're on the phone with them, but they want to see you in person, and they want to set up an appointment and they can't get in the office for whatever reason. Well, why not just set up a video conference with them and do that later on that day or the next morning, whenever it be, but as soon as possible, set up the video conference so that you have that comfort level with them if that's what they need, and you can still accomplish what you need to get done without having that in-person meeting. Because again, if your schedule or their schedules are full and they can't see you for a week and it's something pressing, there's a good chance that they're going to retain someone before they actually get into your office.
Yeah, and I think people just underestimate the simplicity of saying, "Hey, Tom, do you have an iPhone? Do you mind if we FaceTime? I'd really like to, have that face-to-face conversation with you." And it's, people, you see it all the time. It's not unprofessional to do that. And I think that's what people think it's, there's crossing the line there, but it's just not. People actually prefer it.
Yeah, definitely. It's becoming more and more the common way to communicate. I know with my family and stuff, I often will end up FaceTiming. And so that's more the norm. It's like, I think I will do video talking to someone more often than actually talking to them on the phone. So it is something that's getting more and more, especially for the younger people out there,
which tend to get in accidents quite a bit. So the third point there is integrate with your lead management system. And, again, there's 7,000 ways to do that, but, tell me what you're thinking about, what your point is.
Yeah, well, just a lot of these systems allow you to go ahead and send out an e-retainer through the lead management system. So then it's all, when it's received, it's already put into the client's file and their information is already there. So having it to see if the service that you're using integrates with your whatever your CRM is that you're using is something to consider when looking at what to use and what provider to use.
I agree. On to the next one. So mastering the one call close. This is intriguing to me. So tell me what does that mean, and how do you do it?
Well, what that means is that you want to be able to close them on the first call. And that sounds a little bit crazy to some lawyers. I've worked with several that doesn't matter. They have to see that person in person, and I understand that. But an example would be in DUI defense. When someone's retaining my office for DUI defense back when I was doing that, we don't have a police report. We don't have anything. The person just got arrested. So they're telling me their story, and we're doing this over the phone. Well, if they were to come in the office, the story is the same. There's no additional information that they're going to bring in. We don't have the police report. We don't even have the blood alcohol level oftentimes. So there's not really a point that's much is going to get accomplished. So that's one way when I'm talking to someone, I'll explain to them, like, look, I'm more than happy to see you if you want to come in person, but we can take care of this right now. And then I'll send you out my information packet, which is about 12 pages long. It goes through a list of questions from, what time did you go to bed last night? How many hours did you sleep? What did you have to eat? What did you have to drink? All these different things that are going to cover things that you want to make sure that they write down while it's fresh in their mind, and just send that out to them. Make sure you get that back quickly so that you have that. And then once you get the police report, you tell them, okay, well, why don't you come in now that we've got the police report, and let's go through that together and the information that we have. And that would be the best time for us to meet. But I'm more than happy to meet you if you'd like to, if that makes you more comfortable, but we can take care of it now over the phone. And you'll find most often they just want to take care of it over the phone.
Yeah, and people, I think they call you because they want a solution, right? They don't want to hear that you don't have the solution. I mean, and when I call someone, I don't call a plumber to be, thanks for the advice, I appreciate it. I'm going to go do this myself now. I call them because I said, well, great. How soon can you be here, and how easy is this going to be for me? So the easier that you make it for them, the quicker you make it for them. A, it seems like that there's a sense of urgency and that you care, and B, you get that person in your system and you have them, around. They're not going to go look anywhere else. They're not going to do any more searching.
Right. And that goes back to originally that one of the biggest things is if you're showing empathy and the client, and you're connecting with that client, you're going to be able to go ahead and ask for that retainer and be comfortable doing that because you've already developed a relationship with that person over the phone. And I know it's hard to do, and it's hard for some people to still imagine, but it can happen that way. And I understand you can have them come in afterwards. Best thing is, like, you want to take care of this now? I can send this out to you, and you can come in. We can set you an appointment in 2 days to come in. But if you want to set this up right now, I can send out the information. We can get this done now. And a lot of times you'll find out that they'll do it now. So that's something that's just, you as an attorney, you've got to start practicing and make it a point to at least try. Don't force yourself, but you got to try to start learning to close over the phone. So many attorneys just are scared to do it, and they just don't ever ask that question or try to do it. Another thing too is a lot of times lawyers just simply spew out when they're on a call with someone is all their expertise and all this kind of stuff about their background and everything, when the person doesn't really want to hear that right now. They want to know that you handle that particular kind of case, whatever their problem is, that you've handled that before, that you've gotten good results, and that you would be a good choice, or you'd be someone that they would be very confident in handling their problem that they have now. And so it's not telling them that you're the super lawyer, this and that. Now, all those things can be important and done at certain times, but I see often when listening to calls that lawyers get into how great they are and talking about themselves more so than listening to what the client's real problems are. So it's something to consider when you're trying to do that one call close.
Yeah, I agree. And I do some public speaking, and I took some classes. And the first thing that, my coach told me was, Travis, no one cares about you. No one wants to know what's going on with you. They want to know how you can help them. So if you don't make it immediately about how you can help them and what's in it for them, then, you're going to lose that particular, whether it be the crowd or their attention. But in this situation, it still applies because people really want to hear, how can you help me? I don't care that you went to Harvard and that you're at 10 on AVO and that you've been doing this for 35 years and so on and so forth. It's like, great. That's great. I read all that earlier. That's why I'm calling you. So,
right.
I
realize what's important to them. And attorneys often, I went to Southwestern Law School. In 10 years of having my own firm, I was asked that, I think, twice, what school I went to. So they don't care what school you went to. They care that you understand their problem, that you can provide a solution to their problem, and that you're a good person, a good fit with them. And so, again, it's speaking back to the client, listening to the client, showing the empathy, and letting them know that you understand their problem, not that you're some expert on everything and all this great stuff, because they don't care. They don't even know what that means.
Yeah, I had a attorney tell me one time, and this is really insightful of him. He said, before I pick up any call, he goes, I literally set my intention, and I have to tell myself my intention is to help this person in any way I possibly can.
I
And
love that. That's great advice right there. Another thing that I know some firms do is they'll put even like a smiley face for the staff, like on their monitor, remember to smile. Just by you smiling when you're doing the intake or talking to someone, you're going to be that much more energetic and and come across that much better with the client. So smiling is actually a big thing to do that actually really helps.
yeah, I agree. And one, just anecdotal example, I had a personal injury client who he hit a nice sized firm, but he took all the intake calls, and he just loved to talk about how the insurance companies would take advantage of people and all this other stuff. And when he finally said, "Okay, I'm going to get outside my comfort zone and not do that,"
Yeah.
his conversion rates and hire rates went up like almost tripled. So
Right.
it was crazy, and he was shocked. So he's like, "Oh, I thought people would want to know all this, and they really want to know how smart I am and how much information I can share with them." I'm like, man, they don't really care.
No, they want to know that you've handled a problem that's similar to theirs or just like theirs, and that you can provide a solution to that. So
So
if
why
you
are
hear
attorneys so comfortable closing? I mean, that's a big thing. And I even, have to work on this myself, but it's, always asking for the business, right? Attorneys forget their salespeople. And
I get it. Yeah, and a lot of attorneys hate the term salesperson. They're like, we're not a salesperson. We don't do that. I'm an attorney. I'm this, and that. Well, guess what? You're running a business. If you're in practice for yourself or working for another private firm, you're in practice for that firm. You need to generate revenue. It's a business. And part of a business is being a salesperson. And it's not a bad thing. If you're selling someone because you are I honestly believe when I was retaining people that I was the best choice for them. And so if you feel like you're the expert, you understand the stuff, you can help them, if that's truly how it is and that's the way it should be, then it's okay to ask for the sale, for the retainer, whatever it might be, because you're providing value to them. You're helping them. And you got to look at it that way, not that you're lowering yourself because you're asking for money on the first call or whatever it might be. Too many attorneys get stuck on that. It's just like, look at the PI attorneys back in the day when it all of a sudden became okay to advertise in the phone book. And so many PI lawyers said, oh, that's I'm not going to do that. That's for cheap attorneys or whatever. And sure enough, that became a huge thing where firms that did that, really, really scaled and grew, and people missed their opportunity back then. And that's happened with the internet, and now that's happening with social media and other areas as well. But you got to be on top of it and be willing to go out there. And again, you're providing a service that's helping someone, and you need to understand that and focus on that part of it.
And Tom, we just had another comment, but it's a good comment from Brian, and I just want to answer his question real quick. He says, it's not helpful just to kind of generally talk about systems and CRMs and everything without providing information. And we will be providing you with detailed information during this webinar and after the webinar specifically, with links and some educational information that we'll follow up with to everyone who registered. So we just don't want to dig too deep into those details because it can get really granular. But again, we will follow up with a good amount of information that you can utilize and other resources as well. So.
Right. And anyone on the call is welcome to email me directly. It's thomas@scorpion.co. That's CO. But email me. I'm happy to give you, transcripts or some information, intake examples, whatever it might be. If you've got questions, feel free to give me shoot me an email, and I'll get right back to you.
Yeah, and same here. Both of our contact information is the same, but feel free to reach out if you have any questions. But again, we'll provide some detailed information about resources and how-tos after the webinar is over. So, top intake mistakes made by law firms.
Yeah, well, the easiest one is they're not following up. So a lot of times, most law firms, if they get a call and say it's an online contact form, say they get that form, they'll call that person once and leave a message, and that's it. And it's bewildering. It's crazy to me because I'm seeing this happen all the time here at Scorpion with the clients and other law firms that I work with. And it's just, okay, one call. If guess what? They're probably good looking for a lawyer. If you got their voicemail, good chances they're not going to take down your number, especially if you're calling from a block number. So you want to be calling from your office phone number that has their phone that they can call you back. And then making sure that you're following up and call them again. Another thing too that you mentioned earlier, Travis, which is a great thing to do that a lot of law firms are not doing, is if they've provided your information and they're asking for more information and they've given you your their phone number, you can text them. Text them information, say, hey, I'm here for you. If you have any questions, let me know. And then it's right there on their phone. And as you know, most people are going to respond to a text, definitely over a voicemail.
Yeah, it's nearly 3 times the response rate. I mean, there's been studies that have been done. And by the way, you don't have to use your own cell phone number. There's CallRail or CallFire or all these systems that we utilize with our clients that you can text through that will keep your, number private, and just you could text through a tracking number.
There's some great apps, and we can provide some info. There's Dialpad, Grasshopper, Ring Central. All these things are like VoIP or in the cloud phone systems, but they're apps on your phone, so you can call through your phone and be using your office number and be using your cell phone, and you can also be texting through that. And then also those programs and the other programs that you mentioned allows your office to actually send out a text and then reply to that text. So it's not just you from your cell phone, and I'm not an advocate of giving everyone your cell phone number. That can become kind of messy. So definitely using one of those apps, and we can provide you with some more information after this is over. But those are definitely ways to go.
Tom, we have somebody's asking for our email addresses again, and they're at the end of the presentation on the last slide. But again, my email is Travis at James Attorney Marketing, and Tom's is?
It's Thomas at scorpion.co. CO. So.
Yeah, and that's without an M, so CO.
Yeah.
One thing that we constantly beat into our clients' heads, or we try to, is track your data. And I think that's the biggest mistake law firms make. And when I call, one of the first questions I ask clients who are thinking about working with us is, what's your cost per lead and what's your cost per hire?
Right.
I think I probably 1 out of 10 attorneys can say, give me a general idea of what that is. And the importance of that data is, I don't know if we could run without it at our company.
No, and you really can't. You don't know what you're getting if you're not tracking that kind of numbers. And then also that's, failing to track crucial data is also, what is the retention rate of different employees? If you've got different people answering the phone, are they following the scripts that we talked about earlier? And if they're following the scripts, like, what are the retention rates? And there may be someone that you think is great on the phone with people and everybody loves that person, but it turns out they're retaining 10% of the calls that they get, whereas this person that you think is so shy and not that great, they're retaining 50% of the people that call. So having that data and being able to review that and having a consistent message that's being out there using scripts and things like that, you're going to be able to take that data and then make informed decisions that are going to help your intake and increase your conversion rate.
Yeah, and there's great systems. I mean, Agile CRM, Infusionsoft, a few others that you can actually call from the CRM, and it tracks, it records the call and puts it in the client's profile. It gives you call tracking metrics, and so there's a lot of cool systems out there that can do that. And we'll provide some information after about those. But the third point here is really it's kind of fundamental, but I mean,
you would be surprised. So not answering your phone, it happens so often, it's crazy. So the call comes in and no one at the firm picks up the phone and it goes to voicemail. Or they don't have an answering service and it's after hours. I know an attorney in Orange County that I work with does criminal defense, and she tells me, well, she takes all the calls, and after hours, the calls are forwarded to her cell phone. And if she can't get to it, they leave a voicemail and she calls them right back. And I'm like, well, really? Like, you do a decent amount of volume and it all goes to your cell phone after hours and you always get back to them? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, and do they always leave a message? And she's like, yes. And sure enough, we're at lunch when this is going on. So I called her cell phone to see what her message said. And it said, voice box full. So that was just like, okay, what are you doing? Your voice box is full. So you're not getting the messages. It's amazing how people don't realize what's actually going on with their own firm.
And that's a big one. I think people need to step back and take an inventory of things that are happening, because there's, again, what I brought up earlier about saying, I signed 99% of the people that I actually want to sign. Like, yeah, okay, that's not true. But the fact of the matter is, it's okay if you make mistakes. It's okay if these things are messed up. But you either need to spend time or hire someone to help you fix and correct these issues, because just some minor tweaks can make a huge difference in your revenue and your staff, your culture. I mean, there's a lot of things that it can do for your business, and it doesn't take a holistic change or a complete overhaul of your business to do so.
Right. Just implementing some of the stuff is going to get you started, but you do want to try and do an overall go through your systems for your whole firm, but just implementing a few things. Just think about if you can retain an extra 10% of the leads that come in every month. And, I don't know what those leads equate for each firm. They're different. And like in the personal injury world, it's a crapshoot. You could be losing a case that might be worth several $1,000,000. And so do you want to risk that because you don't have some systems? You're not willing to pay $400 a month for a quality answering service?
Yeah, and there's answers like Ruby Reception, Lex Reception. There's tons of these systems, and they're really cost effective. That's the thing. And if you have someone who's calling your firm trying to reach you, you're giving business away if you don't have someone on the other end of the line. I mean, that's just a fact of the matter. Because last study that I read said that 2 out of 10 people actually leave messages on voicemails today.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. I wouldn't be surprised if it's even higher stat than that, because I don't leave voice messages with people. For the most part, it's texting. Everything's done through text. So,
and going on to the last point here. So tell me, failing to keep up with technology. My computer screen's a little wonky today. So failing to keep up with technology.
That's just with firms not understanding the evolution. And so, there's firms that I work with that are still emailing a PDF of a retainer that the client has to then print out, sign, and if they don't have a scanner, they have to go fax it back or have someone scan it for them. When doing a simple, e-retainer program can get that thing done without the hassle of that. And again, every time you send a document out like that, that's potentially retaining the client, and then that gives that client, unfortunately, if there's issues with that and they get another phone call, all of a sudden you've lost that client. So for not very much money, you can get a much higher return on your leads and retain that many more people. So it's just crazy that people aren't utilizing that. And then we talked earlier about newsletters and all the other things that are involved. There's so many different things, but the technology today allows you to do things in a way that's a lot less expensive than it was even 5 years ago.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, technology is something that we work with heavily here in automating systems inside firms. But it's one of those pieces where I still get turned and say, no, I mailed in my shock and awe package. And, that's the first thing I do. And my comment back to them is saying, well, you understand that they've already hired someone before they even get your shock and awe package.
Right.
So, people have not embraced the fact that technology has changed the way people are hiring service-related businesses. And that is something that people really have to understand, that the intent is filled very, very quickly. It isn't the day of, I'm going to go look and shop around and, weigh my options. They literally are going typically with the first person that picks up the phone.
Yeah, well, the first person that picks up the phone and then, creates that connection with them.
Yeah, sure.
So, and it's amazing to me. And lawyers are some of the slowest to adapt to the new technologies. They always seem to be behind the curve here. So if there's anything out there that you can do, we're happy to give you some advice and some recommendations on different things. But there's plenty of different software things to do to track stuff. And the technology, again, the texting is huge. And again, these topics within themselves can be an entire webinar on doing that. So we're just trying to cover some of the basics here for intake to make sure you've got the best practices going. And then you can email us, or, I'm sure we'll be doing other webinars on more detailed areas.
It's a good idea. Actually, we may just go ahead and throw one on the books for next week and do a follow-up to kind of dive into some specific systems and the basic functionalities behind it. Because I think that, the more we work with law firms and the hundreds that we work with, we find that very few actually know about these things. So I think it'd be very helpful.
Yep, definitely. Sounds good.
So we have about 6 minutes left. So we have some client intake takeaways.
All right. So empathy is impactful. Obviously, we talked about that. I think everyone should get that by now. You got to have an actual system in place so that you can measure it, understand it, and then make changes to adapt and keep improving your intake system. E-retainers are a huge deal. So again, in most cases, you can do an e-retainer, and so you want to do that if you're doing criminal defense, if you're doing family law. Sometimes, usually they're going to come in on family law, but personal injury, if it's a low-end case, you're typically going to get an e-retainer for that. It's just a way to make sure that you're getting that person signed up. And then work on the one call close. I get that it's a hard concept for a lot of firms to understand, but it makes a world of difference. And my ability to do that when I first started my firm made a huge impact and allowed me to be very successful when I first started my firm, compared to, my main competition was a 10 attorney firm, and they couldn't keep up with me because I was on the phone and I would make someone feel comfortable and they'd end up retaining me, versus, their firm, which they talk to someone that's a appointment, and then they're going to come in 3 days later, and it's 10 different attorneys, so they don't get the personalized attention. And it's getting just comfortable realizing that people are okay retaining you over the phone. One thing I will add, though, is you do want to have them at some point come into the office. It's always good to have that face-to-face with them to create that connection, because a lot of these clients, depending on what it is, they may be repeat clients that you get down the road. You want to make sure that they're referring you out and that they're happy. And so having them and meeting them in person at some point is always critical to me, to make sure that that happens. But again, for the initial call to retain them, you don't have to meet them in person.
I agree. And we have a couple people that have joined us a little bit late, and Kenneth, we'll be providing you the video and audio for you can enjoy it, watch it later. And we had a couple people who actually messaged us, said, a follow-up webinar would be great, Tom. So, maybe we'll put something together.
Sure.
For next week and pull that together. But I just want to let everybody know that you can call Tom or myself anytime and talk to us about these things. And, we'll basically, I know Tom does it. I don't really do much selling at all. I do more of educating, and, if people want to work with us, they can do that. But if they don't, then they don't. But, for us, it's really just about putting the information out there, because we really do love working with law firms, and we like to be successful. And there are many of these things they can do themselves. And, so they should try to do some of this stuff, because understanding how to do it is, much better for them in the long run. And then they get to a point where they can't do it, or they have resources where they can hire someone to do it. But I think that, certainly Tom makes himself available to almost everybody, which is one of the reasons that we love him so much. So please.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to help and give you some suggestions on different programs and whatnot, and we'll do some follow-up webinars on this as well. But the same thing here with Scorpion. I love the company. They're amazing. They do great stuff. I'm not part of the sales team. I don't have commission or anything like that. So I'm happy to talk to you about it, but I'll send you over to someone that might be a little bit more, give you more information on the actual, what it takes in your area as far as to develop your practice. But love working with Scorpion, love working with our clients. And again, the intake stuff I'm passionate about, because it makes such a big difference with the clients. Again, if you're getting 100 leads a month and you're retaining an extra 10 leads, that makes such a huge impact on that firm. And then for Scorpion, they're now a tremendously happy client, because they're retaining the leads that are coming in, versus the same exact firm that's getting the same quality leads can be upset because they're saying we're spending this much money and we're not getting anything in return. Well, if you take a look at your intake system, you're going to see that that's where the issue is. It isn't the leads that are coming from Scorpion and they're all bad. The funny thing you get is like, well, the leads are all bad. And you find out, well, they're calling the leads back like a day later or 2 days later. Guess what? The only people that are going to pick up the phone are people that have shitty cases or don't have the money to afford you, because they've already been retained by someone else. So those leads are going to seem bad to you because they're not picking up the phone. It's because they've already been retained. And the ones that do, if you're waiting 24 hours or 48 hours to get back to them, it's because the other firms have already rejected them. So it's something to think about.
Great point. And I can't tell you, I agree. And I can't, tell you enough how many times we say, look, it's not our job to get people to hire you. It's our job to get people to have interest in what you provide. And the attorneys that I've worked with in the past who had taken ownership of their, intake process and made that change are still lifelong clients, and they should. So don't, jumping ship from Scorpion to somebody else, or from James Attorney Marketing to somebody else, it typically is not going to help your situation. There's no marketing firm that's going to develop a higher quality lead that's ready to hire you right away, to some degree. But, you still have to do your part. You still have to put these systems in place, because at the end of the day, they're not hiring Scorpion. They're not hiring James Attorney Marketing. They're hiring Tom Wallen, the attorney. So
right. And part of Scorpion and James Marketing as well is you're putting your best foot forward. You're presenting yourself in the most professional way, and using information and graphs and call to actions that are tested, that give you an up over some other companies maybe that are doing your marketing for you. But at the end of the day, it's still how you handle that call once you get that lead. And if you're not doing your job, it doesn't matter who's doing it for you. It doesn't matter how many leads you're getting. If you're not converting to your highest potential or even close to that, that's on you, and you've got to change that.
So Tom, I know that you're giving the free guide on intake best practices on One Call Close, and your email's on the screen here. Again, and my contact information is over here. Again, Tom is with Scorpion, and I'm with James Attorney Marketing. And it was great to do this webinar with you, Tom. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to having you on again to dive into some of these other details. So we will send out a follow-up to this to the participants for if anybody's interested in the nitty-gritties of what we talked about, and we'll dive into some particular pieces in that arena to where we can actually leverage some of the resources Scorpion has, and then some of the resources we have as well. So I think
sounds good.
That'd be a lot of fun.
Appreciate it.
All right, Tom, thanks a lot. And for everyone who joined us, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.